Considered the ultimate power in the universe, the Death Star mobile battle station. But how does it compare to another universe, a grim, dark universe? Today we look at the greatest battle station of Star Wars versus the mysterious superweapon Starfort the 41st Millennium. How do these two compare and which is more powerful? Let's discuss. Starting with what we know as Star Wars fans, the Death Star. Now obviously we will be considering both the DS-1 and DS-2, but as they both serve similar functions, you can consider them one and the same other than size and appearance, I suppose. The Death Star was designed by Galen Erso and manufactured by a number of different groups, including the Imperial Military Department of Advanced Weapons Research, Kuat Drive Yards, and Sinar Fleet Systems. This superweapon was the largest mobile battle station the galaxy had ever seen. It was 160 kilometers, 100 miles, in diameter with 357 internal levels and a surface area of 45,000 square kilometers, with a surface made of quadanium steel plates. Powered by a hypermatter reactor in the interior of the space station, this gave life to the hyperdrive, the 123 Kuat Drive Yard sublight engines, and of course the superweapon. The superweapon used the energy of the hypermatter reactor focused through giant kyber crystals, among other various components, into a beam capable of annihilating a planet or obliterating large portions of its surface when not at full reactor strength. We see this with the destruction of Alderaan at full power and the surface destruction of both Jedha and Scarif with minimum reactor power. Later with the Death Star 2, we find the battle station capable of vaporizing entire Rebel capital ships, because as we know, their shields weren't capable of repelling firepower of that magnitude. Using a weapon as powerful as the Death Star superweapon isn't always necessary, and for those occasions, the Empire has smaller weapons and starfighters. Let's run the numbers because it's about to get a little crazy. The Death Star Mark I had around 12,000 XX-9 heavy turbo laser batteries, 15,000 turret-mounted twin light turbo laser batteries, 10,000 Super Blaster 920 laser cannons, 10,000 light ion cannons, 20,000 turret-mounted point defense concussion missile launchers, 50,000 turret-mounted twin heavy laser cannons, 50,000 turret-mounted quad laser cannons, and 1,000 heavy tractor beam projectors. With numbers like that, it could be hard to imagine how a few squadrons of Rebel starfighters took down the Death Star. But in reality, the Death Star wasn't made to counter small craft like X-Wings or Y-Wings. It had a focus on large-scale assaults, although considering there were no massive militaries to fight against, who knows why they didn't think a few starfighters would pose a threat. In truth, their line of logic comes from the ignorance and a fatal but intentional design flaw. So I suppose they weren't wrong to think an X-Wing was a non-threat. But when the starfighters did show up, they had their own space superiority fighters. In fact, the battle station had a complement of 7,000 TIE fighters, 3,600 shuttles, 2,800 AT-series walkers, from AT-ATs to AT-STs, and 1,860 landing craft. Not considering the loss of life, the sheer loss of spacecraft and heavy walkers must have been devastating. But yeah, also the people, I suppose. Which consisted of a crew around 1.2 million. 342,953 Imperial Navy and Army garrisons, and 25,984 stormtroopers, all mission dependent. That means there's probably hundreds of thousands of civilian personnel as well. But to get back on track, how devastating was a mobile battle station like the Death Star? Well, considering the fact that it had the ability to travel through hyperspace as well as propel itself with sublight engines, it's deadly. Take away the design flaw of the DS-1 and the story of Star Wars doesn't end so hopeful. It had the ability to take on the mightiest of militaries, and this doesn't even include the support from ISDs and other warships of the Imperial Navy. The Death Star truly was an ultimate weapon, probably the greatest seen in Star Wars. However, Star Wars isn't the only fandom that contains super destructive battle stations. Traveling to a galaxy of grim darkness, we read a quote by Liber Monumenta: "The architects of the edifices known as the Blackstone Fortresses remain unknown. All analysis of their materials and construction methods has proved inconclusive. Attempts to date them vary massively between 17,000 years old and 300,000 years old. They have remained dormant since their discovery in the second millennium of the Emperor's divine rule. Even with most of its systems inoperative, a Blackstone Fortress made an incomparable foundation for a naval base." So starting out the gate, there is almost no understanding of these vast star forts and their full functionality. No idea who made them and no idea what their full potential is, but we need something to compare it to the Death Star, so let's dig a little deeper. Now there is speculation on their origins that goes back millions of years to a little war known as the War in Heaven. Basically the most massive and destructive war the universe has ever known. It is believed by some that the Old Ones constructed these star forts to counter the Necrons and their Catan masters, as they were susceptible to warp-based attacks. Which leads us to the most destructive weapon on the Blackstone Fortress that we know of, the Warp Cannon. This cannon creates a devastating rip in the fabric of real space, leading to an eruption of psychic energy from the Immaterium, better known as Chaos. The levels of power unleashed by this warp cannon have been known to obliterate entire star systems. Abaddon the Despoiler, this guy's kind of a dick by the way, used 2 of these fortresses to destroy a planet known as Phalaris too. And then he went even further, using 3 to cause the Tarantus star to go supernova during the Gothic War. Side note, he also threw one at a planet, known as Cadia, which completely broke the planet, but this happened well before the Imperial Guard broke. With Warhammer 40k, 6 Blackstone Fortresses have been discovered, and this happened early in the Imperium's history around the 33rd millennium. They were found scattered across the void, and despite the best efforts, nothing could be discovered on who created them and what exactly the nature of the super hardened onyx-like metals were made of. Nevertheless, the Emperor claimed these, and they quickly became cornerstones of the Imperium's many fleets. Something important to note is that while mostly lying in a dormant state with minimum power, Blackstone Fortresses still put out enough power to allow the Adeptus Mechanicus to link numerous weapon systems and life supports to the unknown energy grid. Going back to our buddy Abaddon, he was able to gain access to the full range of capabilities the Blackstone Fortress had to offer through devices known as the Hand of Darkness and Eye of Night. He then commandeered a number of Blackstone Fortresses. With their full abilities unlocked, they could travel under their own power and of course use their warp cannons to devastating effect. So you could see the Blackstone Fortress in 2 states, one being the Imperium's space stations modified to house weapon turrets and fighter launch bays, obviously deadly in their own right, but nothing compared to its full potential. The full potential, which has been described as a living thing pulsing with power, could travel through the galaxy and tear into the fabric of reality. Now I know that was a lot, but bear with me because now it's time to imagine them fighting one another. How would this go down? For one, you have to consider the fact that the Death Star is a man-made construct armed with the most powerful super laser in existence. The Blackstone Fortress is unknown in design and function. We don't necessarily know its full potential either. For all we know, enough of these star forts linked together could annihilate the galaxy and maybe the universe. So in a head-to-head matchup, what exactly would happen? Death Star versus Blackstone Fortress. Truthfully, it all comes down to who can fire on the other first. If the Death Star fires off his laser and impacts the Blackstone Fortress, it's game over. Or is it? Because while we know the Death Star could blow apart planets, can a single full reactor blast penetrate the incomprehensibly powerful shields? And even then, when we consider the size of the Blackstone Fortress being 10,000 to 100,000 miles across, is it enough? No, the Death Star would need to first bring down the shields, and then prepare a second volley, and by that point the Death Star would be crippled by the focused power of the Immaterium, if not destroyed altogether. One blast into the reactor and the Death Star is gone. Unfortunately, I have to concede this match to the Blackstone Fortress. Its power is seemingly unlimited, its shields and weapons beyond anything the Empire of Star Wars could create. Sorry Death Star, I guess you gotta blow up again. I know some of you may disagree, so tell me how you think the head-to-head would go down in the comments below. I am open to other speculation and scenarios. Considering this was my first attempt at doing a Star Wars Warhammer crossover, let me know how you liked it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, join if you feel so inclined. Also, check out the Discord and the occasional live stream. Have an amazing day, and may the Force and God Emperor be with you.